All right, welcome back to the podcast. We got a lot of news on the NFL. In today's episode, this will more likely be an NFL update more than it is a Falcons update. And I plan on doing these with more news when NFL starts to come out, but we'll still have a Falcons one. So, first things first. Earlier in the week, the NFL owners, coaches, GMs, they all met for their meeting. And there was a picture that was taken of the coaches, and my God, there's so many like funny things about that picture that you could just look at. Like you have the Grudens matching, you have Andy Reid, just with all that swag. He's just this picture's funny. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's really funny to look at for a little bit and just watch it. But they were there to talk about some of the rule changes, and some of them we'll discuss here. So, the first one, obviously, is the pass interference calls. You can now coaches can challenge these calls and non-calls for pass interference, and this is good, but it can also be bad, just because if a team's down big, they're just going to keep lobbing it up in the air because there's always some sort of grabbing when the wide receivers are running their routes. There's always some sort of grabbing like that. But regardless of that, the Saints finally got their way and got this called. This passed. The Bengals were the only team that declined it. But the Saints, this could come back to bite them because last year the Saints were the most penalized team for pass interference. And their corners, they are their weakest link on that defense. And with this new rule, they still are their weakest link. Weakest link. So, with the pass interference calls, this was something that needed to happen at some point. And I think with a little fine tuning, we could probably get it to where it will be acceptable for other people. Not other people, but be acceptable. If the coaches want to challenge this, they can. It'll use one of their 2 challenges in a game. I don't see them challenging it that much unless like the game's on the line, fourth quarter, you're down by a touchdown and you're lobbing it up and something happens. I could see them then throwing it, but like in the first few quarters, I don't think so. I think they'll just let it go. Another rule was the blindside hits. Those are now illegal. And some of those hits are pretty brutal, to say the least. They're fun to watch, but they are pretty brutal. But we should have known something like this would have happened because we had the kickoff changes, then we had the whole lowering the helmet to initiate contact thing go on last year, and we knew this was going to happen. And I can understand why they're doing it for player safety. I'm pretty sure players will, they might hate it at first because football's violent. I'm all about having some violent football, but I want the players that I like to be on the field for as long as possible because I like them. I want to keep seeing them play their career and not get hurt by one of these hits. But regardless of that, blindside blocks are now illegal. And I really ain't got much else to say on that. I think in the preseason, if some of this happens, we'll probably see it just like every play or something like that. Just flag every time. And then once the regular season starts, I think it might get toned down a bit. There's also some new rules on penalties on touchdowns. So if the team commits an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty on a touchdown, the opponent can have the penalty be assessed on the kickoff or the point after attempt. And for the extra point, instead of it being where it is, it'll now be a 48-yard attempt if there's unsportsmanlike conduct. So like in the Saints and Rams game, not the playoff game, but the Saints and Rams game where Michael Thomas pulls out the phone from underneath the field post. That obviously is a penalty. I ain't got much else to say on this one, just because it's just like a simple one. We'll rarely see this happen, and when it does, it'll be just like, oh wow, that's kind of a weird rule, but okay. Now the refs can eject a player for flagrant football acts and non-football acts, and they haven't, at least from what I've seen, they haven't really described what these non-football acts are. But what I can think of is that in between plays, like fighting each other, like kind of like Josh Norman, OBJ back during that one game with the Panthers and Giants. I think that's what they're trying to hint at, is like, hey, this is what we mean by this new rule, because obviously they'll still be ejected for the plays of like the fights between AJ Green and Jalen Ramsey, as well as Michael Crabtree and Aqib Talib. They'll see those guys be ejected, and I think we'll see this more in terms of the fighting. But the one that I think a lot of people were hoping would get done soon was the overtime rules. These have been tabled until May, so it seems like they're still trying to discuss an outcome of this. They haven't figured out a way to do it. Obviously, the main point is that both teams get the ball, and I'm alright with that. It needs to be changed because it's with a league that's being put towards a high-powered offense and passing and just everything. I think having both teams get a chance to have the ball in overtime makes it better. I understand that the game can be longer. It can be, it's just the game can be longer. I think back to Super Bowl 51. What if the Falcons had another opportunity to get the ball? What if they got the ball in that Super Bowl? Would it be different? Would we be the Super Bowl champions, not the Patriots? What if the Chiefs got the chance to get the ball in the AFC Championship game this year? Would they be going to the Super Bowl against the Rams? Who knows? And I understand why some people defend this rule because, you have a defense out there. Your defense should be able to stop them. I mean, like in an instance in Super Bowl 51, our defense was extremely gassed. Our reserves were extremely gassed. We had nobody that was everyone was tired because the Patriots went on such long drives that everyone was tired and no one could get a rest. We go into overtime. Patriots win the toss. Game was over from that point on. I mean, yeah, you had hopes, but they were false hopes. And then, for example, like the Chiefs, they don't have a defense. They rely on their offense to win them the game. And so I understand that. I understand the reasoning to why people defend it because, your defense should be able to stop them. But sometimes, like with just these teams that you just can't stop and you get into overtime with them, your defense ain't going to stop them. So I do hope this overtime rule does change. I do hope that it has both teams get a chance to possess the ball. And there's a clip of, I agree with what Deion Sanders said about how the rule should be changed. There's a clip of it somewhere on the internet. I can't remember exactly what he said. This was a couple months ago after the AFC Championship game. But the next rule that was declined was the onside kicks, which would eliminate onside kicks and have it be at the would be a 4th and 15 at your 35-yard line. And I can see why this was declined, but I think there should be an alternative to onside kicks because this last year you had a higher chance of completing a 4th down than you did an onside kick. I don't think there were that many onside kicks recovered this year. I think they were pretty low. And especially with the new rule changes to the kickoff, which are now made permanent. Onside kicks are, just hopes at this point. They were hopes before, but now they're just, now they're their own Hail Mary. So, obviously the big ones are the pass interference calls of these new rule changes, the pass interference call, going back onto that one, it's going to be a bit weird. Like I said, I don't think we'll see teams use it a lot unless they're down by a few touchdowns, need to get back to the game. And I like it at the same time because wide receivers like Antonio Brown and Julio Jones, they don't get a lot of pass interference calls because, I mean, you think that they wouldn't because they can come down with those catches with that many people on them because they've done it before. But now, with the Raiders and the Falcons and teams that have those players, Browns with OBJ, teams that have those elite receivers, they could probably abuse this a little bit. I don't think you're allowed unlimited challenges because you know that when a pass interference is right, you know that you're going to get one back. I think how the NFL sets it up is that you get 2 challenges and then you get a third one if you get both of them right. So you get 3 chances for one of these, and like I said, I don't think teams will use this in the early quarters. Maybe the late ones if they're down big and are making a comeback. Also, I probably wonder about like, oh, what about the Hail Marys then? Well, I forgot to mention this when we first talked about it, was that in the 2-minute warnings for both the going into halftime and in the end of the game, coaches cannot challenge them. It can go up to the booth to be challenged, the people up in New York, but the coaches cannot challenge it. So, I mean, I don't know about the Hail Marys. Like, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what happens in the preseason. I mean, I really doubt preseason, but we'll see what happens in the NFL. This could be a big change. This may not be that big of a change as we think. And in some game news, obviously this was announced a little bit earlier. The Hall of Fame game will be between the Falcons and the Denver Broncos. So obviously the Falcons are representing Tony Gonzalez and the Broncos are representing Champ Bailey and Pat Bowlen. And I mean, obviously you can see why the NFL chose the Falcons over the Chiefs, because the Chiefs are division opponents and Denver's got to face them twice, and you don't want to give anything away to your division rival. And so Falcons were obviously the other choice. There are probably other teams for different players, but Tony Gonzalez was arguably the best tight end in the game. And it's another preseason game for both the Broncos and Falcons, so they'll have 5 weeks of the preseason. And if you've ever watched the Falcons in a preseason game, you know that they are terrible because they rely mostly on keeping their starters healthy. So, yeah, in this first week of the preseason, the Hall of Fame game, I don't think you should expect to see the starters out there for very long. One drive, that's probably the most, if that. So that's the Hall of Fame game. I'm excited for it until like the second quarter when it gets boring. But it's a good game to have, especially between the Falcons and Broncos, because I'm a Falcons fan. I know some people that are Broncos fans. And I just want to mess with them a little bit, see if we win. So back to the games, the first game of the year is not a defending Super Bowl champion. It is against the Packers and the Packers at the Bears. Oh boy. So the NFL is going into its 100th season, and I like this game a lot because the Packers and Bears, one of those teams that have that intense rivalry between each other, and they're playing, I think it's like the 199th game of the NFL. And the Packers probably want a little bit of revenge from what happened last season. To me, it seemed like that first matchup at Lambeau Field between the Packers and Bears, I feel like the Bears derailed the Packers season. And maybe that was for the best because, the Packers team really needed improving, but they really didn't do it season after season after season. They'd make those small changes, but this year they made some big changes by obviously firing their head coach, getting in a younger one, making some splashes in free agency, something that they haven't done in a while. the Bears definitely derailed the Packers season last year. We have no idea if they would have been the Packers of the past if they, didn't have Aaron Rodgers hurt for the opening weeks of the season. And they do look good. Both those teams look to be good, especially after the draft. We'll see what the Packers look like with 2 first-round picks. The Bears don't pick till the 3rd. We'll see if Matt Nagy in that offense, Mitch Trubisky, can be a little bit more consistent. We'll see if the Packers can get back to the Packers of the past, see how this new offensive-minded head coach can do with Aaron Rodgers. And the Patriots, the defending Super Bowl champions, will be playing on Sunday Night Football. We don't know who they are playing, but we won't know until the schedule comes out. You can probably take a wild guess at just looking at who they're supposed to be facing. You probably just take a wild guess and just be like, oh, it's going to be this team. The Patriots are going to look very different. They're going to have a nice talent of youth if they don't trade up in the draft. They have 12 picks this year. 12 picks. Jeez, that's a lot. They can use those picks maybe to trade up or build some depth on that team. And the interesting thing about this is that Gronkowski retired. He was a matchup nightmare on that field. And you know that the Patriots will be targeting a tight end in this year's draft class. And what a draft class to do it. What a draft class to have your star tight end retire on. There are a lot of tight ends in this draft class that are looking pretty good from what I'm told. I'm not much of a draft expert, so I have no idea. But yeah, the Patriots will be without Gronkowski. So we don't know how that'll affect them. I assume that they'll probably target another one that has similar stature to him in terms of size and abilities. But that's mostly the NFL update here for you guys. New rule changes. Obviously, the big ones are blindside blocks, illegal, pass interference calls, pass interference calls and non-calls can be reviewed. And just some of the upcoming games news. That was mostly it. We probably won't have another NFL update until something big happens. I normally will tend to try to keep them bunched up together like this. So obviously, I don't think there won't be one for a while unless the overtime rule changes. Won't be there for the draft. The draft for the Atlanta Falcons, I'll probably just do my opinion on after they're all done, after all the days are done, because I'm not going to have like an hour-long show talking about who our first-round pick is. I ain't going to do that. I'll just wait till all of them are done to do it. But I would expect another Falcons-related podcast this next week. And this next week might be a little bit different because I'll be gone for a few days, so I might not get one done for next week. Who knows? I might just rush myself to do it. But regardless of that, I hope you guys have a good weekend. We'll be back on Monday to discuss the 2018 season of the Atlanta Falcons. So with that, I hope you guys have a good weekend, and I'm peacing out, y'all.